Hey, Amos. Thanks. I'll start it again. Hold on. Hey, Amos. Welcome to the show. As a way of getting started, tell us about yourself.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. So my name is Amos Schwartz. I'm the managing director of Techstars in Austin. If you don't know Techstars, we're an accelerator and global network that helps entrepreneurs succeed. I've been doing this for 5 years, which means at this point I have 50 companies in my portfolio. We actually just kicked off the newest class this week. And also recently wrote a book called Sell More Faster, the ultimate sales playbook for startups.
And let's dig into that. What was your motivation to do that?
Thanks for asking that question. I love that. When the reason I wrote the book, and there's this story that I sometimes tell about how it came to be, because I didn't really intend to write a book, but the reason I wrote it ultimately was because I grew up as an operator inside of early stage companies, sometimes as a founder or founding team member. And my job was always around figuring out how to get to product market fit, how to get to repeatability, and how to get to scale for newer companies or nascent companies. And then as my role here at Techstars, I'm constantly helping not just my own portfolio, but across the entire network, companies with their sales, early stage sales, figuring it all out, the process, the prospects, all that whole thing. And so, the quick version is I figured out repeatability in the things that I was saying. Yeah. I saw that I found the customer, which was, any startup really, but the language in the book is more for B2B enterprise sales, but it's really for any early stage company. And so the scale part of it was writing a book so that many more entrepreneurs could have access to the things that they were coming to me for already.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of companies, they get the friends and family, not just the money, but the clients, right? Yep. People the logos, the initial logos. And then all of a sudden they go, well, this sales stuff is time consuming. What do we do? Do we hire somebody? Who do we hire? How do we start scaling it? And I was the guy that they used to hire, right? And I'd be like,
so you totally know, yeah.
I know completely, right? And they give you a laptop, and the next day they go, can I get a forecast? And you're like, I just got here. Well, what did you learn through that process?
Yeah, so I think you will appreciate exactly what I'm saying, having been through it before. Firstly, my opinion is there are very few people that you can bring from outside of a company at the earliest stage to go do this. There's some people like, I can do it, you can do it, but there's not a lot of us, and we're not really salespeople, we're customer development people. Yeah. And so there's a couple of things that I learned, and the first is don't hire a salesperson. The founding team members need to be doing this at first until you get to some early signs of repeatability. And then you can start to bring in a salesperson to see if your repeatability is just you or if it's actually repeatable. But the thing that I talk about in the book, and it's foundational to the book, and I believe it's foundational for every company, which is in order to really start, you have to have an extremely tight definition of who you believe your customer might be, and a process to go test whether you're right or wrong. And it's a kind of thing where if you're doing this well, you're as an entrepreneur, you're feeling uncomfortable with how narrow your definition is. And the thing that I assert is when you can do that well, and you can get a yes 100% of the time, it becomes really easy to understand what those attributes are and then play with the attributes where the yes won't be 100% of the time, but you now know how to go out and identify and ideally close as much of your entire TAM that you could.
No, that's not easy to do. And
no.
I think sometimes the worst people to do it are a technical founder who's never met a client.
Yeah.
Because they think it's everybody, or it's a company that's 10 times the size of the company it should be.
Yep.
Because you get the technology adoption life cycle, and you're looking for those early adopters. Who's most likely going to buy this before we run out of money?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And, and I hear that a lot, right? Like, well, I'm technical and I don't really know how to sell. And, I have a couple of sort of thoughts and responses to that. But one is like, look, starting a company is hard. If you want to be running the company, like, this is part of the job. Yes, over time, you will bring in people that are better than you to do it. But in the early days, this is actually part of your responsibility, is to go and figure out whether the thing you think you should be bringing to the world can be brought to the world. And, it's a great comment, because I've had technical co-founders come through my programs who would say exactly that. And what I have found is they're actually phenomenal salespeople because they're not salespeople. They are doing the thing that they want to do, which is providing value with the thing that is valuable to somebody else. And it turns out that a lot of times no one can do it better than them in the early days because they're so mission driven around it. And they do believe in it because it was their idea to begin with.
Okay, let's say they then get that product market fit. They find out who's most likely to buy it, but now it's time to hire a salesperson.
Yep.
I think certainly in the last 15 years, everyone's been following a certain playbook that I think is the opposite. Hire these people with no sales experience to become sales development reps, to set up 15-minute meetings. And I'm like, every time I see it.
Are so on the same page. And, I grew up, like, I prospected for myself. I was, I remember the early days, I opened up a newspaper and I was like,
right. Who's hiring, right? Yeah. Who's hiring that buys my stuff?
Yeah, exactly. So I actually talk about this in the book. I think it's in like the 4th chapter of the book. I talk about hiring your first salesperson, and then in a subsequent chapter, how to scale from there. The way that I think about it, first of all, in an early stage company, especially, if you think you're going to hire someone who doesn't have early stage experience and you're setting them up for success, you're kidding yourself. Yeah. Because this world is different. There isn't a process. There's so many unknowns, and sales in itself is hard enough. And to think that you're going to also put someone out there to basically figure out what the world looks like. They're essentially doing product and marketing and all these other things. So the way that I think about it is, ideally the CEO, but someone on the founding team is figuring out what they believe repeatability looks like for themselves, and then hiring a single person to see if they're right. And then once you have that person, you have the beginning of enough data to say, okay, this is repeatable. Then you hire a few more people to see if you can repeat the repeatability. And then so you get to 3 or 4 people. And then once there is repeatability there, then you can start to think about scaling. And that's when you move from more like, okay, you don't have to hire quite as early stage people or people with early stage experience, because not that there's still not a lot to figure out, but a lot of the really hard stuff has been identified. Who your customer really is, what your customer is really buying from you, why do they care about it? You know the answer to 80-90% of these questions. And so when you bring in the kind of person you're describing, you can give them the playbook at that point. But I do think a lot of people miss that step.
And when do you get the marketing engine going? As far as, do you hire a consultant? Do you get part-timers? Right, because
I think it's a little bit different business to business, but I am not an advocate for a marketing leader to be a consultant, and in any instance. Yeah. And I think marketing, marketing has a few different ways to think about it, right? Like there's branding and what that looks like, and then there's demand generation and digital acquisition. That's a little bit different. I think that you can do earlier. Yeah. But the early mindset is not, we're going to go scale. The early mindset is, what do we need to do to learn whether or not that our theory on who our customer is and what they're really buying and why they care, what do we do to test those theories? And we use marketing as a way to test it. So you're doing some top of the funnel stuff, but you're doing top of the funnel stuff so that you can learn more about the middle and the bottom of the funnel. Yeah. So that when you have figured out who our customer is and how do you actually keep them, how to go to the top of the funnel and widen
it. And what are the signals that you're ready to scale?
Yeah. The way that I describe it to people, ideally you figure out a way to quantify it, and it is quantifiable in most cases, but since that is different from business to business, the way that I like to describe it is when you can go into a conversation and 80 to 90% of how that conversation is going to go, even if the person you're talking to has no idea, because you've been through it enough. When you understand that, you're getting closer to being able to scale.
Yeah. And then, is it hiring a rep a quarter? Is it getting a VP of sales? What's the right mix there? Because I've seen it done really badly.
Yeah. I'm not, so those are 2 different questions. The how many people, I think about the how many people, it really comes down to what are the unit economics of the business? What's the CAC LTV? What's the payback period look like? Like how do the economics of the business work? And what is your funding against that, right? Like if you're able to raise a big round and if you know your metrics as well, you should be able to raise a good round if you're growing. But you have to look at your financial model and say, what is the financial model telling me? So like when I hear sales, anyone, but especially sales leaders say like, yeah, I feel like we should hire 4 people. I'm like, why? And they're not referring to the financial model and sharing that knowledge with me. Like the answer is not stop and build your plan, and your plan should be math driven. And then in terms of a VP of sales, I'm not sure I have like a definitive opinion on that. Because I think it depends a little bit on what and like if the CEO comes from a sales or marketing background, you might be able to wait a little longer. If the CEO is technical, you might need it a little bit sooner. So I think there's a lot of variability there.
And again, that VP has to have come from an early stage company.
100%. It
really does. They always come from a big company, and they're like, "Well, where's my assistants?"
Yeah, I think that aspect is more important than whether or not the person comes from the industry or not. In fact, I think in an early stage company, it's better when they don't come from the industry unless they've been early stage before in the industry. Yeah.
Yeah. And what do you do after that as far as getting the model right? Because I think the model is completely broken today. I think everyone's hiring inexperienced or no experience people to pound phones and email and destroy their brand reputation.
Yeah.
And then have other people who give demos and then hound the person and still don't know how to do enterprise sales. And everyone's trying to reduce the cost of sales instead of increasing sales.
Yeah, gosh, I love the way that clearly we think very similarly about the world. The other thing I'll say before I try to answer the question is, when you said model, my mind went somewhere totally different, which I think just probably is indicative of how I think about it, which is when you said model, I was like, what's the math? Right? Like I went to the mechanics, which is not what you're asking. And the thing you're asking is really important too, right? Because you can't build the right mechanics if you don't know what do you believe the right structure is for your business. And I talk about this in Sell More Faster as well, which is that it is different for every business, and it takes the founding team or the CEO out having those early conversations and building an early sales process, and then seeing how that evolves over time and being really explicit. And the way that I talk about it in Sell More Faster is the sales process is one thing that I am an advocate for over engineering early on, because all that means is you are writing down every single possible step that someone needs to go through in order to go from the idea that they could be a customer to a paying customer for a long period of time. Over time, you can condense those steps together as you realize that they are. But I think until you truly understand what your sales process might look like, it is impossible to truly answer what the model of type of person and structure you need, right? To say like, oh, I'm gonna go get a bunch of SDRs. To me, that means you're lazy and you don't want to go do the hard work. Guess what? It's really hard to build an early stage company. You have to go do the hard work. And if you're not willing to do it, I don't care how badly you want to be an entrepreneur, you shouldn't be. I know that's a harsh statement, but I believe that.
Everyone copies the unicorn in the category, and they're a unicorn for a reason. Right? And you might be a mini unicorn or maybe unicorn, but until you are, don't copy their model. Right?
Right. Yeah.
You got to do what works for you. You're just this little acorn.
That's right. The thing that I tell people, that the expression I use, and it comes from like the part of my other life, which is race your own race.
Yeah.
You have to you should look around and say, okay, I know I want to be on this type of, if you're a bike racer, this type of bike, and I know I'm going to show up at this race course on this day, but you should be doing the things that make your business successful. And the only way to do that is to truly know who you are and what your business is. And you have to be really intellectually honest and introspective on a constant basis and questioning yourself on a constant basis, instead of saying, well, they do this, so that model must work, I'm going to go do that as well. Or even worse is, this is what I've done in the past, so of course it's going to work again.
Right, exactly.
That is so dangerous, and I've seen so many companies fail because of that.
Yeah, they take what they did at another company and they put it into a startup where it's like, well, no, we don't have demand. They don't know who we are. We have no brand recognition.
That's right, yeah.
And what I heard, the other thing was labeling and identifying the exact process, the mistakes, the stall points of each deal, because they do repeat. And the problem with B2B is you're at different stages on 10 different accounts all at once. You can't keep it in your head.
No, it's impossible.
It's impossible.
Not only can you not keep it in your head, you don't want to keep it in your head, because when you want to scale this out, if you can't articulate to someone, here is what your life is going to look like on a daily basis, and you're going to have people over the business. You can't articulate that to somebody and have data to support why you believe that to be true. You're setting them up to fail.
And so many, certainly in the Valley, the VCs don't want to invest in these type of companies that require people. They want.
Well, I think we're going to see a shift in that. I think this is just my opinion, but it's more macro. There's a lot of similar. I was around in the 90s and through the boom and the burst, and I was around in the 2008, and this is be my third time through this ringer, and I'm seeing the same behaviors, right? So people talk about it as frothy and there's lots of capital going in, but the thing that they're not talking about is it's encouraging entrepreneurs to move faster than they should, with less of an eye on the important part of the unit economics. And they're focusing on things like top level growth, but not, can this ever be really a business?
Scalable.
The thing that you're saying is, right, like, yeah, scalable, right? Like it's something that I say that is really unpopular, but I believe is like, but the idea of growth hacking is over. It's dead. It cannot happen anymore. And the reason that I believe that is because all of the early adopters have found all of the early adopters for the technologies that we're using today. So now you have to go do some hard work.
And that's it. When I go into a client, I try and explain that they're going to get 50% of their revenue through the square root of the number of deals. So let's identify those deals and put the best people on those deals.
Yes.
And when a $50 million company gets a $50 million deal, that they're like, they want to do more of them, instead of having a bunch of college kids calling up everybody in the phone book trying to get a meeting. That I think the intelligence part of sales needs to be applied. Now, do you typically find people coming to you only when things are going wrong versus while they're building?
Yeah, you're right. This is the story. This is largely the story of my life, not just in sales, but for my entire job. But if I'm being really transparent about it, it's something that I appreciate, right? It means that they trust me and they believe that I can be valuable in some way, whether it's me personally or knowing that I have a network that can also be helpful. So yeah, the answer is yes. Most of my conversations are either repair. But I think, like, even for fast growing companies, that's still the case, right? Because if you're doing something truly new and innovative, like, it's all new, like none of us have the answers. And so how do we collect enough people around us? So even like, hey, I'm growing fast and the wheels are starting to come off, like, that's a good problem, but it's still a problem that we have to solve. Otherwise the wheels do come off and all of a sudden you're not doing so well anymore.
Yeah. So, I mean, to sell more faster, they're the kind of, things that push each other apart. When you sell more, it's usually slower. And if you do it fast, it's usually less.
Yeah.
Or smaller deals.
Yeah. I wrestled with whether or not that was the right title for the book. And I don't know if the answer that it is the right title or not. The reason I went with it was because I thought it would be an attractive title to get people intrigued to say, what is this thing? But if you actually read the words of the book, and I say this many times throughout the course of the book, this is hard. This is going to feel tedious. You're going to feel like you're slowing down. But when you do these things right, you will get to the place where you can scale your business much, much faster, and you will do it in a condensed time period. And so the sell more faster is not like you're going to sell more faster daily, but you're going to make a heck of a lot less mistakes in the first 18 months, 2 years of your company, so that at 2 years you are at scaling versus at 6 years you're at scaling.
And what are the couple of big mistakes you see founders making? Once they've got product market fit and they want to start scaling, that's the hard part, right?
So I'll answer that two ways. One, I think the number one problem that I see is the thing that you said early on, which is that they hire salespeople way too early. Yeah. That's the number one thing. They think they should hire a salesperson when they should either be doing it themselves or hiring a customer development person. And I think the number two thing, and you may disagree with me on this, and I'm totally cool. My definition of product market fit is when you know exactly who your customers should be, and they are buying your thing and they cannot live without you. And so I hear people say we have achieved, or we are about to achieve product market fit many cycles before they're even close to it. They have signposts that they're a product market direction,
Yeah.
but looking at direction versus fit. And that difference is the difference between saying, okay, I'm ready to put the gas all the way down to the floor and go. And what ultimately happens is, and I see it all the time, we've all seen it. You hear about companies raising big rounds, and then they hit flat growth, or 18 months later, they've got massive churn. And it's because they believe they have product market fit, and they didn't. They have the ability to get to product market fit, but they haven't figured out how to get there yet.
Yeah, cool. And if somebody reads the book, what do you hope they get out of it?
My hope is that they have a series of frameworks to take them from, whether they're at day 0 or they're at day 400, a series of frameworks that helps get them on exactly the right path to build the most successful and optimized business that they could for the thing that they're doing. And that doesn't matter if you're a service-based business and it's a team of 3 or the next unicorn. And I believe that the frameworks in this book will allow people to do that. There are other frameworks that work also. Right. These have worked for me over and over again.
Cool. And where can people go to follow you?
You can follow me. I'm on Twitter at I am Amos Lee. I'm decently active. I'm much more active on LinkedIn, just Amos Schwartzfarb. And you can buy the book on anywhere books are sold, but Amazon is probably the best place to buy them. And it's Audible, Kindle, or hard copy.